Hey everybody! Hope everyone's doing well. This video is really my first video that is not on Life is Strange, so this is a bit of a jump for me. I'm hoping this one does well. We're going to be talking about a lot of theories from Night in the Woods, one of my favorite games and one that's really a cult classic. I mean, I love this game so much, and I even wrote in college a pilot to a TV show adaptation for a class. Like, I wrote an adaptation of Night in the Woods. It's really one of my favorites. I love the character dynamics, I love the story as a whole, and it really hits home because of the area it takes place in. It's heavily based on the Rust Belt in northern Pennsylvania, and that's a place I have a lot of nostalgia for. Real quick, before we get started, I wanted to say I have officially started my Oxenfree playthrough. I'm sure some of you saw it. That's going to be uploading on Thursdays and Tuesdays at around 2 or 3 o'clock. I'm going to be playing through the game before I, end up actually doing theories on it, and I've completed the playthrough. I'm just going to be uploading them as time goes on, and I loved the game so much, so much. I'm actually starting a second playthrough, and I'm going to have a notepad this time around so I can, so I don't miss anything. So, yeah. But without further ado, let's get into Night in the Woods theories. So first we're going to start off with a more simple one. It's just a theory about the song Weird Autumn and how it's about missing people. Basically, some of the lyrics could be interpreted in a way of someone being taken or someone disappearing. For example, the line, "Out on Arbor Street, I saw Autumn leave, her family drove away." It mentions nothing about Autumn actually getting into the car, and I know that's a bit of a stretch, but it mentions nothing about her getting into the car, and it could instead be symbolic, basically saying that because she disappeared, her family has moved away and that last bit of her is gone. Also, the lines, "Hey man, have you seen her around?" that kind of thing, are also a little odd. Wouldn't you just kind of like ask her where she's been? It could also be sort of, that sort of town paranoia of where could she be, where is she gone. They also mentioned that the house can't be sold. So that's another thing that we see in Night in the Woods, a lot of abandoned areas due to the disappearances that are seen and that happen around the town. So now we're going to get into some possible cult members. People who aren't necessarily confirmed outright to be part of the cult. However, there's a lot of evidence that sort of points in their direction. One that is sort of obvious, but at the same time there's still some room for whether or not it's true, is the council members, whether or not they are a part of the cult. The evidence in favor of them being part of the cult is the fact that they are their entire purpose is to keep the town alive, the same as the cults. So that would lean into that sort of aspect, as well as the fact that they do end up voting down the homeless shelter that is going to be built, which would allow, them to have more people to sacrifice, more people on the streets that they could just pick up and sacrifice to the Black Goat. Now, the cult does sort of dismiss them, they say they don't see the whole point, so that could imply that they, are part of the cult, or at least aware of them, but the only reason they're interested is, keeping the town alive. They don't genuinely believe in the deity, the god that they are sacrificing these people to, which could be implied, which could mean, they're missing the point, which is to honor the Black Goat instead of just keeping the town around. Next on the list is May's aunt, and the primary reason for this is because she is just around when things happen. Molly says a lot of things that I would consider vaguely threatening. Bad things could happen to people like you, considering that May sort of fits the archetype of someone that the cult would sacrifice. This could be sort of a subtle warning to May to get her life together. The other thing is she, once again, is right there when the arm is found. There's 1 or 2 times where Molly absolutely should have been able to see the ghost, which we learn is actually a cult member, snatching someone up at the festival. The other thing is her demeanor. You would think if your college dropout niece is ranting to you about how there's ghosts kidnapping people, you wouldn't really take her seriously. You would be more focused on the literal arm that you found in the middle of the town. When instead, Molly's tone is that of someone who is aware that there is something going on and is telling May to back down, to be safe, so she doesn't wind up being sacrificed by the cult. The other thing is she did not appear in the game's epilogue, after the cult members have been seemingly all killed. She doesn't appear there, well, at least she didn't until the Weird Autumn update came out. So I'm not sure where exactly that falls in the canonicity of the game. So on one hand, she, could have gone down with the cult members. On the other hand, she's right there, so either she just survived or she wasn't a part of the cult at all. But, it's one of those details, and it's very purposeful that in the epilogue you will see that certain people are no longer in their normal spots in the town, and it's implied that they are cult members. So for Molly to not be there at all, at least until this update, it would sort of imply the same thing. Here's one that I really like, and it sort of adds a much more ominous feeling to the opening section of the game where you're deciding on what kind of story May is telling in relation to her grandfather. And it's basically that her grandfather was a cult member. Now, her grandfather fits the bill of a cult member pretty much perfectly. He's a productive member of town. He was a miner, so he would have been in the mines and probably would have encountered the goat. He could have been one of the first people to encounter the goat. The other thing is, we really don't know too much about him other than the fact that he was a miner and that he was interested in books, and you get to choose what genre of books that is. We can all agree he fits that bill perfectly. And on top of that, his sort of ominous ending to the opening section where he says, this house is haunted, and then dies. To me, that could be interpreted in that he's done bad things, he has sacrificed people for the good of the town, and that maybe even the town as a whole, you could consider that haunted because you can't look at it the same. Haunted in more of the metaphorical way, not that there's actual ghosts in there, but the memories of these things that he's done have filled the house for him, and that it's not just home, it's haunted. There's bad energy here. That might be stretching it a little bit, but I do think he's a prime candidate to be a cultist, if not one of the first cultists. This is a quicker one. May's dad may be a cultist. The only thing that would really guarantee this or really make sense with it, because we don't know too much of him outside of the very positive interactions we have with him throughout the story, is that he is dissatisfied with how workers are treated, and that if this is a sort of cult, or if this is the kind of cult that is passed down generation to generation, father to son, if his father was a cultist, which is likely because of his occupation, then it would make sense for his son to be inducted as well. All right, so this next theory is one that I really, really like because I feel it adds a lot of depth to May's dissociation issues. And I know that's a mouthful, but hear me out. And basically it goes that the people aren't actually animals, and that this is just how May views the world. Her doodles of Greg, Angus, Bee, and herself as these different animals, that is how she views things because she is dissociating from reality. In reality, they're normal people, but in her perspective, to cope in some way, they are just shapes, they are just these sort of, little animals. And there's a lot of dialogue in there that doesn't lend itself to them being animals. They never fully acknowledge themselves to be animals. Lori M specifically talks about the human spirit. Now, on the other hand, there's two small things that, would make you think that they are animals, and it's that May's father calls her Kitten. However, that is a very common, well, maybe not very common, but I would say that's a common enough nickname for, a parent to give to their child, especially a daughter, that could be written off. And the only other thing is that when May is looking at the board in town and there's the ball of yarn, she calls it patronizing. Now, maybe she gets distracted easily and it's something like that. But those are so small that I really feel that using the art style as a way to really view May's perspective is not only the best way to view it artistically, but also I feel like it just has the most evidence behind it. Now, we are going to get into some of the deeper theories here, and we're going to kick things off with God does not exist. Basically, it's sort of just your average run-of-the-mill, everyone was crazy the whole time kind of theory, that for the cultists, they were really sacrificing people, and they did exist. However, ultimately, there were no bigger powers involved. There was no one pulling the strings, and it's just pure coincidence that when they started sacrificing people, things started to get slightly better in the town. On top of that, with May, her visions can easily be explained as, as dissociation episodes or just crazy dreams that she is taking seriously because of her issues with dissociation and holding on to reality, I guess you could say. And that her feeling better after everything happens isn't, you know, that the black goat or God or whoever has sort of released their grip on her, that kind of thing. It's actually that she has just worked through these issues, and despite all the chaos, she's found a way to ground herself with her friends through the lessons she learned along the way. Now here's one that gets a little more specific, because let's be honest, the whole theory of the gods or God is dead, that none of them exist, is a kind of a downer theory. It takes a lot of fun out of the game as a whole. So this theory is more so just focusing on the idea that the black goat itself doesn't exist, and it kind of pulls from similar things that, you know, the town is still dying. It's just a coincidence that things got slightly better after they began to sacrifice people. So for one, we never really see any direct evidence of the goat existing. May never has a direct encounter, and the only time that she does, it's after a few days where she is barely alive and she's tired, and for all we know, it could be some sort of dissociation or hallucination. The other thing, when May and B are looking at the old newspapers, there's a mention of hallucinatory gas being found in the mines. This could very easily explain why people would believe that there is some sort of being or entity within the mines. It could sort of be a case of shared psychosis. One person goes down there, swears that they see this sort of creature, they go back up, grab someone, bring them down, they inhale that same hallucinatory gas, and because this person is saying, "Can't you see it? Can't you see the goat right there? Can't you see it?" They just sort of believe them and begin to see it because they believe that they're supposed to see it, as well as the fact that they are literally inhaling gas that makes them see things. Also, when you're stargazing, there's a little bit of foreshadowing here. When he mentions that the old gods are probably just stand-ins for things that we can't control, which we know in reality is true. You see that a lot with the Norse gods, things like that, gods related to weather and the sun and things like that. And I don't see why it wouldn't happen in modern times. I mean, in modern times, there's things that we seemingly worship that aren't even technically gods, I guess you could say, not to get too deep. So now we're going to get into what I think is the most interesting theory, and it's that the janitor is God. I'm referring to the janitor at the beginning of the game, and a lot of theories circulate around this character because he is seen in places he shouldn't be. He says a lot of strange and cryptic things and sort of plays a very distant, ominous mentor role to May. So to start off small, he is a bird, and every pope, clergy member, religious figure we have seen is a bird. There's also a statue of him in the graveyard, which is really odd. So when May is hallucinating that she's in the church and she's actually in the hospital, the janitor enters, says some weird things to the family, like sort of calms them down, and then says he's fixing the door. Now, this is something that he does at the very beginning of the game. He's fixing the door at the bus station that May ends up stopping at, or that May ends up arriving at. This could be seen as him sort of setting her up on her journey, you know, creating the gateway for her to go through and learn this lesson and help the town, that kind of thing. And on top of that, when she is, you know, nearly dead, he fixes the door, allowing her to come back into the land of the living. Not to mention with the, you know, ominous space cat, they mention there being holes to everything that may allow creatures through, creatures like the black goat, things like that. So when you could sort of view that as a doorway in space, and the janitor, the one thing we see him consistently do is fix the door. I feel that this could be him sort of letting on that he is involved in some way that we don't realize with the black goat, with the space cat, with everything. Even May's dreams and dissociations to an extent. He's pretty much following May throughout the entire game, watching over her. So I think while he may not be God, he could certainly be a god. Because this is the sort of universe that I would say is heavily inspired by Lovecraftian sort of writing. There's a lot of entities, there's sacrifices, especially seeing, you know, direct parallels of an entity that you have to sacrifice people to in order to keep a town alive. And also the very nihilist view that at the end of the day, people are so small and insignificant compared to these gods beyond our comprehension. That's a very Lovecraftian idea. So it would make sense for there to be multiple gods in this world, in the same way that there's multiple gods within the Lovecraftian world. Now, this last theory isn't really a theory because we won't ever really know the answer. Revenant Hill was a game being made by the same producers of Night in the Woods that was recently canceled. And the art style is pretty much, it's very, very similar to Night in the Woods, especially with the main cat pretty much having May's face. However, now it appears that there are, humans and skeletons walking around. And so it sort of begs the question, how is this, if at all, related? Why would they reuse the same art style if it wasn't related? Or specifically, a very iconic character from a previous game, if it's not related. Some people viewed this as some sort of prequel, where it's before the fall of humanity and the rise of these sort of animal people that ended up sort of inheriting everything. Other people view it as a sequel where, animal society has collapsed, allowing for humans to rise up and sort of having to restart society from an earlier age that we see in Revenant Hill. However, we will never really know because it was canceled, and it's honestly such a shame because I was really excited for this game, and I would have loved to have seen what happened in that game, if there was any connection at all. Because it appeared to be in a similar genre of supernatural sort of Lovecraftian ideas, and I really loved, I know I say this a lot, I really loved the vibe and the feeling I got from it. For me, it also reminded me of like Over the Garden Wall, for example. That sort of sepia tone, darker, fantastical kind of thing. Thank you everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave comments below about theories. Do you have any of your own theories to add on to mine? Are there any other games you would like for me to check out? Because I'm always open to suggestions. I really, really am taking as much criticism, as many of the critiques that I see in the comments to heart so I can really improve this channel. I really love doing it. And remember, I uploaded my Oxenfree video. The first one, the audio is a little funky, but the next one that will come out on Tuesday, I fixed the audio, and from there on out, we're pretty much in the clear. So thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good morning or evening or afternoon or whatever.